These days, making videos about James Gunn is kind of tricky because the second I sit down and prepare things that I want to talk about, there's just more and more developments all the time, but I'm still going to do my best to discuss all the latest that's happening with the DCU, starting of course with a new report suggesting that after the disastrous Peacemaker Season 2 finale and his Superman box office flop, James Gunn could get fired from his position at DC Studios if a Warner Brothers sale to Paramount ends up going through. Now, those of you that are new to my channel, almost 3 months ago, I was one of the first online to declare James Gunn's Superman a box office flop and that Gunn's position wasn't secure at Warner Brothers, even though the mainstream media kept suggesting otherwise. I was also one of the first to report that Warner Brothers used aggressive PR to conceal James Gunn's failure with both Superman and Peacemaker in order to keep their stock price up before a potential company sale, which would directly benefit Warner Brothers CEO David Zaslav. And if you'd like to receive these type of exclusive reports before they appear in the mainstream media, please make sure to like and subscribe. This new bombshell article comes to us from Cosmic Book News, written by Matt McGloin, a guy who I know personally, and based on my interaction with Matt until today over the years, he's generally a pretty stand-up guy, so I do trust a lot of the stuff he reports on, but of course when we're dealing with insider information, it's always important to acknowledge that there's still a bit of speculation here, so please keep that in mind. In any case, the main point of the article is that should Warner Brothers get sold to Paramount, that would probably quickly pave the way out for James Gunn and his DCU, including Man of Tomorrow. That's because the Ellisons, who own a majority stake in Paramount and are one of the richest families in the world, are more right-leaning, have a good relationship with the current US president, and probably wouldn't want to keep James Gunn's more politically divisive version of DC, which he seems to be pushing in a very ultra-left direction these days. And while I had already known this and considered it, I still didn't initially think the Ellisons would be so quick to fire Gunn, but rather just let him finish up Supergirl, Green Lanterns, and Man of Tomorrow before sending him on his way. However, right after I had discussed the Ellisons here on my channel a few weeks ago, a storyline had been introduced on Gunn's Season 2 of Peacemaker that suggested that white people in our world are very much like the mustache man from Germany, something that didn't sit well with many viewers, and after that, I can't say how much patience a more pro-America family like the Ellisons would have for James Gunn and his far-left agenda peddling. Another issue is that James Gunn was supposed to create something more wholesome and family-friendly, but Season 2 of Peacemaker, which he claimed was the foundation of his entire DCU, was the exact opposite of that.
We have this setting up of all of the rest of the DCU in this season of Peacemaker. It's incredibly important.
And it only got worse as the season progressed. From Peacemaker's naughty birthday suit party where he was fond of dudes, the constant lewd references on the show, and its overall debauchery, which reached a fever pitch in the last few episodes, I think that this could end up being the final straw. And I would say this regardless of all this rumor about Warner Brothers being sold. And judging by Gunn's erratic behavior in recent times, including a lot of flip-flopping on his plans,
I've already finished the treatment for the next story in what I'll call the Superman saga.
flat-out lies.
As a fan, I have to say I'm manifesting a Blue Beetle appearance in upcoming seasons.
Well, I won't say you're not in luck.
And even a sense of bitterness.
Yes, that was the ending. No, I'm not sorry.
It seems like Gunn himself knows that the jig is up, which is why he keeps scrambling to make himself look good, in spite of all of his creative and financial failures. At the end of the day, between his Superman movie, which flopped at the box office, his Creature Commandos, and Peacemaker, which both suffered from low viewership, Gunn really doesn't have any wins to boast here. And to make matters even worse for him, I think that he doesn't act like a CEO of a major studio. He seems very childish, and I think that with Guardians of the Galaxy, you got his humor within a certain type of moderation, and somehow for that property it kind of worked. But everything he's doing now here, where he seems to be creatively in charge of everything and inserting his brand of humor and quirkiness into all of the properties, it feels like too much. And I think that's why people are getting tired of it and thinking that he's sort of overstaying his welcome creatively as well. Not to mention that his overall behavior towards people around him seems rather douchey as well. Another thing that Matt McGloin also mentions in his article is that a sale to Paramount could shift the DC leadership over to Warner Brothers co-CEO Mike DeLuca, whose position at Warner Brothers has really strengthened over the past year because for the most part, as opposed to James Gunn, DeLuca has actually delivered good financial results, something that could provide job security for him should any type of sale go through, or even if one doesn't. According to Matt's article, that's exactly why DeLuca's contract has just been extended with Warner Brothers, which could mean that his presence is considered valuable both to Zaslav and to potential bidders. Interestingly, this is the same Mike DeLuca who wanted to revive the DCEU upon Zaslav's arrival in 2022, with Henry Cavill coming back as Superman and Ben Affleck coming back as Batman, and all of that was in motion until James Gunn was hired by Zaslav, which in my personal opinion is a mistake that Zaslav regrets until this very day, but probably can't say it publicly. In any case, as I've mentioned before, regardless, whoever ends up buying Warner Brothers, should a sale even take place, I think that the odds of a genuine DCU revival involving that cast and even Snyder himself are pretty low. Not impossible, but low, and even Matt's article suggests this, claiming that because all the people involved in the DCU have moved on, the only DC project that would be somehow viable would perhaps be one Zack Snyder movie, likely The Dark Knight Returns. Personally, I still think we're quite far from that happening, and to be fair, while everybody seems to believe that Paramount is the top contender for buying Warner Brothers, they are absolutely not the only ones in the game here. Netflix and Amazon are still a possibility. Now, Apple and Sony probably less likely, although you never know, but according to Matt's article, Comcast could also potentially be gearing up for a bid. Now, it's also important for me to mention that a few weeks ago, well before this article that Matt has written for Cosmic Book News, a few members of the DCEU fan group Lukorama72 had reached out to me and let me know that Comcast was actually a serious contender for buying Warner Brothers, but at the time, I didn't really have any additional information on it, so I was hesitant about mentioning it. But now that I see that Matt McGloin is mentioning it as well, and it's already two sources, then I have to treat it a little more seriously. In any case, my point here is that I believe James Gunn's future will be decided by whoever ends up potentially buying Warner Brothers, and if it isn't Paramount, well, that could potentially give Gunn a chance to fight another day, because I believe that with the exception of perhaps Paramount and the Ellisons, most other buyers would likely let Gunn stay until after his so-called Superman sequel, Man of Tomorrow, is released, before making any concrete decisions. Another option, however unlikely, is that James Gunn suddenly succeeds with either Lanterns, Clayface, or Supergirl in a very big way. Because if one of those projects really delivers stellar results like a billion-dollar box office or a top-rated Nielsen show, that could help Gunn regain some leverage, but if you ask me, I don't necessarily think that's a very likely scenario, based on everything we've seen until now, but still with entertainment, you never know. In any case, if you want to keep receiving all the latest exclusive reports about the DCU, please like and subscribe so that you're always notified when I post something new. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.